Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Hunter Pratt. I'm the multimedia specialist at the Institute of Child Nutrition. I'm going to allow a few seconds for everyone to come in to today's webinar. We welcome you this afternoon. During today's webinar, everyone will be muted by default. You will all be in listen-only mode. At the end of today's webinar, you will receive a pop-up link asking you to redirect to a survey. We ask that you would open that survey and submit your feedback. We value your feedback and we ask that you do that. If for any reason you miss that link, that survey link, you'll be receiving a follow-up email within 24 hours of the conclusion of today's webinar, and that email will contain a link to today's recording as well as that same survey link. You will also receive a certificate within 24 hours of the conclusion of today's webinar. We'll be emailing those out as well. During today's webinar, we'll have some polling questions, and you'll see those screens pop up, and if you would answer those polling questions when you see them. And also at the end of the presentation that Julie will be giving, we'll have a Q&A session. So if you look on your Zoom control panel, there's a Q&A box. You can click that and you can submit questions. And we will take Q&A and we will answer questions as best we can. If we do not get to your question, we will do the best we can to follow up with you. Thank you all for joining us today, and I'm going to turn the presentation over to Patrick.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Butler, and I'm an Education and Training Specialist with the Institute of Child Nutrition. And I would like to welcome you to the October School Nutrition Star webinar on farm-to-school efforts supporting resilient local food systems. During today's webinar, all attendees are muted. There will be time for questions following each speaker's presentation. If you have a question, please type it into the question box on your screen. We will try to get as many questions as possible, but due to our time constraints, every question may not get answered during the webinar. Individuals who have registered for the webinar will receive an email at the conclusion of this webinar. The email contains the webinar recording link and a link to the evaluation survey. Please complete the evaluation survey and ICN will send out the certificates within 24 hours. To assist in meeting the unique training, technical assistance, and professional development needs of school nutrition professionals, ICN has launched the School Nutrition Star initiative to assist school nutrition professionals develop goals and best practices to improve program administration and operations. The School Nutrition Star program offers a multitude of elements, including face-to-face workshops, virtual instructor-led trainings, webinars, and spotlight success stories. ICN collaborates with USDA to host monthly STAR webinars to provide attendees with training, real-life strategies of program implementation and best practices for use in action plans or goals. Training topics, free resources, and educational materials are also highlighted to assist school nutrition professionals with navigating through the enhanced responsibilities of school nutrition operations. The Institute has created a website for all the materials. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Farm to School Efforts Supporting Resilient Local Food Systems. The topic covered in today's webinar fall under the key area nutrition and meet the USDA Professional Standards Code Menu Planning 1130. Our panelist for today's webinar is Julie Brewer. Julie Brewer is the director of the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, Office of Community Food Systems. Julie has over 26 years of experience helping communities identify and fill gaps in their food systems and has worked to improve nutrition and food security at the local, state, and national level. She worked over 10 years on child nutrition and WIC policy at FNS and recently served as the program examiner for SNAP and child nutrition at the Office of Management and Budget. I will now turn the presentation over to Julie.
Thank you, Patrick. I'm going to share my screen here and we will get started. There we go. All right. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's so great to be here with you all. Thank you for taking time to join us today. And thank you to the ICN team for hosting this webinar. As we wrap up National Farm to School Month, we thought today's presentation was a great opportunity to give you an overview of the USDA Food and Nutrition Service Office of Community Food Systems and dig into the amazing work some of our farm to school grantees have done to adapt their farm to school efforts during these challenging times. Farm to school benefits everyone, from students to teachers, parents and producers. Connecting communities to their local farmers, ranchers, and fishers builds strong local economies, improves health and learning outcomes for children, and inspires youth toward careers in agriculture. OCFS, Office of Community Food Systems, works to support farm to school by providing grants, conducting research, and offering training and technical assistance. In short, the OCFS team is here to help our stakeholders start, expand, and sustain their farm to school programs. On an annual basis, USDA awards competitive farm to school grants to support planning, developing, and implementing state, regional, and local farm to school programs. USDA's farm to school grants are an important way to initiate, expand, and institutionalize farm to school efforts. For fiscal year 2020, the Farm to School Grant Program awarded an historic level, more than $12.1 million in grants to 159 farm to school projects spanning 46 states and tribal nations, as well as 2 US territories. This is the largest number of projects funded and the highest total grant funds awarded since the awards began in 2013. Since the program's inception, USDA has awarded over $52 million in farm to school grants, funding a total of 719 projects across all 50 states, the District of Columbia, US Virgin Islands, Guam, and Puerto Rico, reaching almost 21 million students in 47,000 schools. USDA will award up to $10 million in competitive grants to eligible entities through the Farm to School Grant Program in fiscal year 2021. Each grant helps implement farm to school programs that increase access to local food in eligible schools, providing students with nutritious meals while also supporting local producers. The RFA recently released includes 3 tracks: implementation, state agency, and a new turnkey track to support a variety of projects and implementation stages. The grant request for applications can be found online on our OCFS website and at www.grants.gov. Complete applications must be submitted on grants.gov by 11:59 p.m. Eastern on Friday, January 8th. So check out the grant announcement, and I hope to see some grants from you all. So first of all, I'd like to start a poll and ask a question from the audience. First, have you ever received a farm to school grant? And second, do you plan to apply for a farm to school grant in fiscal year 2021? So if you could just click on the boxes and answer the question, we'll get the results here in just a minute. I feel like I should have some music in the background. Some poll music. All right. And here we go. Okay, so it looks like some of you have received a grant, but most of you have not. And it looks like some of you are planning to apply, but most of you are not. So I hope after our conversation today, you might change your mind and go back in and check that grant request for applications and see if there might be an opportunity for you. So And in addition to that, I will share some information a little bit later in the presentation on 2 upcoming webinars regarding our 2021 grant request for applications that might help change your mind. Okay, so in addition to our grant program, OCFS provides extensive technical assistance to support Farm to School. I'll share some specific examples in a moment, but first I want to mention that our most important technical assistance resource is our regional Farm to School staff. Each of our 7 food and nutrition service regions has a dedicated Farm to School regional lead that works directly with our grantees, state agency partners, and other stakeholders to support Farm to School initiatives. We also offer many technical assistance resources online. OCFS has developed more than 20 fact sheets to support various farm to school stakeholders. From incorporating local food in school cafeterias to gardens and tribal communities, we offer fact sheets on a wide variety of farm to school topics. We also offer many, If you are a state agency or a school district interested in taking local procurement training, you can request training through our partner, ICN, as well. And we also have fact sheets that provide guidance on how to incorporate local foods into your school menus, and local procurement guide that covers the basic principles on child nutrition procurement and walks participants through strategies for buying local. The procurement guide can be found on our OCFS website and the Institute of Child Nutrition website under resources. So again, this is where you can request training from ICN on procurement. And then another good way to stay up to date on all that OCFS has to offer is to subscribe to our monthly e-newsletter, The Dirt. We love to highlight farm to school grantee success stories, best practices, and many other resources. Please be sure to sign up to receive the latest news and farm to school news from USDA. In the spring of this past year, as the pandemic unfolded, our team in the Office of Community Food Systems worked to ensure that we could understand what was happening on the ground with our farm to school grantees so that we could provide support and technical assistance. It has been amazing to see the extraordinary actions many of our farm to school grantees are taking to ensure that all Americans, especially children, get the food they need during this pandemic. Building strong and resilient local food systems, supporting farmers, and educating kids and communities about how to grow their own food is more important than ever. I'd like to do another quick poll of our audience. For those of you engaged in farm to school projects or programs, how are your farm to school efforts pivoting at this time? If you want to put the poll up. Are you still in the planning phases of your farm to school work? Have you been providing garden or educational resources for students who are in school or at home? Are you providing local foods for students through your school meal programs, again, for students who are in school or at home? Or are you providing resources for producers to connect to schools and communities? You can click one or all, depending on what applies to you. We'd just like to hear what you've been up to. All right, we're getting some results. Okay, many of you are planning. Oh, it looks like it's a pretty even split across all of these activities. So as you can see, there are a variety of things going on, and I hope that as we go through some of the best practices that we're going to share, you'll see some new ideas. So let's take a look at how some of our farm to school grantees are pivoting their work. The following examples will provide insight on how these grantees have taken creative actions to adapt their farm to school projects to elevate gardening and food production, procuring and incorporating local foods into meals, and agriculture education to support their communities during these challenging times. Let's start with success stories from grantees who focused on gardens and food production. The 2015 Farm to School Census indicated that there are over 7,000 school gardens across the country. USDA encourages food production and education through many types of gardens, farms, hydro or aquaponics, even raising animals, by providing grant funding, guidance, and resources. Growing Gardens in Portland, Oregon facilitates garden-based learning opportunities that incorporate sustainable practices and deepen understanding of the local food environment. Their 2019 implementation grant focused on increasing access to fresh local foods, specifically from the school gardens at 9 schools in 4 districts. Engaging students in meaningful hands-on school garden lessons was one of their objectives. Oops. Sorry, I just lost my notes. Hold on. Such a great story. In response to the pandemic, they pivoted their school garden lessons and have distributed over 1,500 garden kits to families via the school-based food pantries. Kits include materials to grow food at home, make native wildflower seeds, and more. 5 virtual education sessions accompany the activities in the kit. This fall, they are creating and distributing Garden Explorer kits with magnifying glasses, culturally specific cooking kits, including local produce, and a pre-K kit focused on the 5 senses. Growing Gardens is leading 2 high school clubs this fall, one on food justice and one called Grow, Eat, Teach, and a middle school garden club. These clubs also combine the distribution of hands-on materials for growing and cooking with weekly virtual lessons. They have also ramped up production and gardening and are donating the produce to the school-based food pantries. They created 30 5-minute video lessons for use by classroom teachers in distance learning, and adapted the high school internship program to combine physically distanced in-person gardening with virtual projects like creating cooking videos for multicultural family food traditions. Another example, as the only full-service community school district in Minnesota, Brooklyn Center Community Schools serves a diverse population of 2,200 K-12 students, with 85% receiving free or reduced price meals. The goals of their 2019 Farm to School implementation grant were to increase the amount of fresh local fruit and vegetables and whole foods consumed during school meals, and increase knowledge and self-efficacy related to food choices among students. One of their main activities included developing student-led procurement options through their school garden and classroom hydroponic gardens. Starting in March, with the school closures, their in-school gardening was suspended and meal service was pivoted to a pickup model. To adapt, they built a very large outdoor garden space where teachers and new staff became engaged. They planted produce and they used it as a farmer's market during school meal pickup and socially distanced school events. They also handed out recipes that would utilize the produce for families to cook, and seed packets so families could grow their own produce. Another new offering this past summer was a virtual summer school. This included a school gardening club. The Farm to School coordinator organized activity kits for students to pick up and use at home. The garden club members held virtual meetings once a week, and they did activities from fermenting cabbage and growing seeds at home for microgreens to virtual foraging expeditions. The students had a ton of fun, and it sounds fun. I want to join in. The Farm to School program also strengthened their relationship with the local horticulture society that summer, and they were able to provide free plants for families to take home and grow in their own gardens. Later in the summer, the Farm to School program was able to host in-person outdoor gardening classes for children of first responders in their schools. It allowed them to re-engage with their farm partner educator, and the students had access to on-site gardening. Looking forward into this school year, the Farm to School program will be working with the DIRT group, who are mental health practitioners who use food and gardening as a means to connect with students through positive behaviors and social connections. Since the beginning of the school year, it has become a real asset to students. In another example, Fairfax County Public Schools, which is the 10th largest school district in the country with over 189,000 students, their FY 2019 planning grant objectives included piloting a garden to cafeteria program in the fall of 2019. They pivoted various they piloted various garden to cafeteria protocols, including a school garden safety checklist and a communications plan to guide school garden leads and food service staff. Produce from the garden was featured on the school salad bar at lunch. In the spring, after schools and gardens closed due to the pandemic, they applied for a no-cost extension to their grant and pivoted their activities. They decided on an at-home vegetable growing kit would be a great project. They gathered a team from across the school district and partner organizations to create a seed kit program called FCPS Grow at Home. This farm to school learning opportunity provided children a hands-on learning opportunity during school closures to grow a green bean plant at home. Over 200 grow at home kits were distributed in the spring, which included everything for a child to grow a green bean plant at home. The kits were passed out at the Holland Meadows Summer Food Service Program emergency meal site, along with the no-cost meals distributed by food service staff. Each kit contained 5 green bean seeds and a gallon bag with soil. A letter for caretakers was included in both English and Spanish that provided instructions for children to use an empty, clean milk carton from the school meal program. Finally, a robust grow-at-home activity packet was also included so children could observe and engage in the growth of their plant and eventually harvest. The pilot was extremely successful, and Fairfax County Public Schools received both positive and constructive feedback from families, food service staff giving out the kits, and the Holland Meadows garden teacher. Not only were they able to innovate in their garden to cafeteria objective within their farm to school grant, they created a program they could use in the future. Fairfax County Public Schools has sought out and received additional funding, and they expanded to all 63 summer meal sites this summer and handed out over 4,000 kits. Sourcing locally and increasing student access to local foods remains a priority for many farm to school programs, even as schools adapt to virtual learning and take-home meal models. At the beginning of the pandemic, many of our state agency partners quickly pivoted to ensure that their communities had access to local foods, including these 2 2017 Farm to School grantees. The North Dakota Department of Agriculture revamped its online North Dakota local foods directory so that producers, schools, and consumers can connect quickly and easily during the time of COVID. It is now searchable by product category, such as fruits, vegetables, dairy, meat, and more. Before the redesign, approximately 10 people a day visited the site, and now that has increased to up to 400 people a day. The California Department of Food and Agriculture and the California Department of Education worked together to create a new resource navigating a changing food supply during COVID-19 school closures to provide methods for finding local foods, purchasing them, and preparing them. This resource bridges the gap between product shortages that schools, childcare centers, and family daycare home providers might be experiencing, and the food surplus local farmers may have as a result of market disruptions or campus and restaurant closures. The Kentucky Department of Agriculture used their 2018 USDA Farm to School Implementation Grant, named the Kentucky Producer Engagement Grant, to re-grant 10 mini grants to qualifying producers and farmers to allow them to develop and or expand their farm to school program. Need More Acres Farm in Kentucky was one of the recipients. Need More Acres started their farm to school partnership with Bowling Green City Schools in 2010 to sell watermelons. Over the years, that partnership has expanded with support from the Kentucky Department of Agriculture to include a weekly delivery of winter greens and roots to be served in schools as a snack. With the school closures due to the pandemic this spring, Need More Acres transitioned their school-based snack program to salads and local produce snacks that were distributed by buses with breakfasts and lunches to over 3,000 students enrolled in the Bowling Green City and Allen County Scottsville school districts. With support from the Washington State Department of Agriculture, school districts continue to serve nutritious meals to children and support local farms. For example, Concrete School District partnered with United General District 304 to provide meal kits with foods from local farms, along with the school meal distribution. Families then had the opportunity to cook and serve fresh recipes at home. A few of the vegetables provided in the meal kit included rhubarb, broccoli, salad greens, and garlic. One parent noted, with the meal kits, we could take a risk and try something new. With watching our food budget, I wouldn't normally explore new foods. Finally, I'd like to share some examples of grantees who have embraced change and pivoted their agriculture education programming. Farm to school activities bring education alive through experiential learning opportunities, such as tasting new specialty crops or visiting local farms. Farm to School also introduces students to agricultural career paths. As America's farmers retire, our nation's food supply depends on more young people entering the field of agriculture. Farm to School inspires young people to consider careers in agriculture and food systems. Farm to School also helps healthy habits take root early. Early childhood is an ideal time to establish healthy eating habits. Farm to Preschool works to connect early childcare and education settings to local food producers with the objectives of serving locally grown fresh foods to young children and providing related nutrition education. Rooted is a Madison, Wisconsin-based nonprofit organization committed to collaborations rooted in food, land, and learning. In response to the pandemic, several of Rooted's programs have shifted focus to include more support and opportunities for virtual learning. Wisconsin Farm to Early Care and Education and Wisconsin School Garden Network, both of which are partnerships of Rooted and other state partners, are producing and distributing resources around virtual learning for youth gardens, farm to school and farm to ECE activities. They are also utilizing their Facebook pages to share resources and live virtual farming activities, cooking classes, and more. Urban Roots is a nonprofit based in Reno, Nevada that works to change the way kids eat and learn. Through their Classrooms program, they work directly in Washoe County schools to help implement school gardens, provide Urban Roots educators to help teach in the garden, and develop STEM-based curriculum to help teachers integrate the garden into their classroom. Urban Roots also runs the Urban Teaching Farm in downtown Reno, which serves not only as a learning space for K-12 students in the surrounding schools and teen campers, but also as a source for locally grown, nutrient-dense produce for students, their families, and the community. Their 2019 Farm to School implementation grants support serving 1,000 low-income tribal youth at 2 schools in their area, and 2 after-school program sites for the Reno Sparks colonies. Their original plan was to build gardens, conduct lessons on location every week, host youth at the Urban Teaching Farm for field trips, provide take-home activity kits for field trip attendees, and host families at each school garden for a family evening in the garden. Due to the pandemic, they had to shift from on-site garden and farm-based activities and focused on creating a more robust home activity kit to engage families. In the spring, they increased the number of home activity kits to serve every child in the school rather than just the field trip attendees. And over the summer, they created a summer camp in a box. While the original activity kits they planned were for a one-day activity, the summer camp in a box provided a week's worth of agricultural education activities. The activities are translated into Spanish, and they provide all the materials for a screen-free, hands-on learning experience to students, including home-based gardening. They are now also offering virtual gardening classes, a video library with virtual tours of their farm, as well as a farm to school curriculum for K through 8th graders who are currently learning at home. The final grantee I would like to feature is Fresh Farm Food Prints, the recipients of a 2019 Farm to School Implementation Grant. They integrate gardening, cooking, and nutrition education into the curriculum at partner schools through a model of partnerships, standard-based curriculum, cafeteria connections, and food access. Food Prints is the education program of Fresh Farm, a nonprofit that promotes sustainable agriculture and improves food access and equity in the Mid-Atlantic region. This August, the Office of Community Food Systems visited 3 schools in the Washington, D.C. area to see the Fresh Farm Food Prints program in action. Take a look.
Fresh Farm is a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and Food Prints is Fresh Farm's food education program. We have been a part of 2 USDA Farm to School grants. The first was we were a partner with DC Public Schools to establish a program that linked the classroom and garden education Food Prints provides to the school meals program. And now we're a part of a second USDA Farm to School grant to finalize and make accessible the curriculum that we've been building for our Farm to School program over the last 10 years. The funding has allowed us to pursue and complete projects that would have been very hard for us to accomplish otherwise. And the really exciting thing for us has been that the projects we pursued through this grant have been sustained.
I love my job because I make people excited about eating veggies.
Similar to how schools have music teachers or PE teachers, we put a food teacher in the school, and they run programming on a regular basis for students to help them learn to recognize what real food is, where it comes from, and how choosing to eat those foods can really benefit not only their own health, but the health of the planet.
When I first started at Burroughs, I was actually sharing the science room with another teacher. Then, as the student buy-in and the parent and teacher buy-in grew, the principal gave me my own classroom.
I made it a priority to make sure that Food Prints did in fact have its own separate space, because we are trying to invest in the partnerships that we have within the community. We want the neighbors to know what we're doing here in the building does in fact impact them for future years to come.
This past spring, we transitioned to online learning, as so many of us are doing right now. Lessons were tweaked and edited for families to be able to do at home. This website is called Food Prints Anywhere. It has recipes, videos, it has math and science activities, gardening lessons that can all be done at home. It requires minimal supplies, minimal screen time, and for some of the learning, minimal parent supervision, because we understand right now that parents are trying to work too.
If anybody is watching this and they're thinking, man, I could do something like this, you could. You totally could.
Okay. One of the most impactful moments with visit with Fresh Farm in the spring is when our staff met the principal from Burroughs Elementary, Mr. Jenkins, who you saw featured in the video. He described not only how Fresh Farm has transformed the way students at his school have embraced farm to school education and learning where their food comes from, but he shared with such passion how much of a staple the program was when the school transitioned to home learning back in March. The Food Prints teachers so seamlessly transitioned to virtual support, and so many parents thanked Principal Jenkins for ensuring that their students were still engaging in learning and felt a sense of community through this program. You can learn more about Fresh Farm and the Food Prints curriculum at this website. As you can see, there's a lot of great work and innovation going on in Farm to School, and every day there are new examples of how Farm to School programs adapt and thrive despite the challenges. This is a very creative and committed community, and there's so much more work ahead. So what's next for the Office of Community Food Systems? Earlier, I mentioned that some results from the Farm to School census, a periodic nationwide survey of school food authorities that allows us to see the extent of farm to school programming. Last fall, OCFS completed data collection for the 2019 Farm to School census. We are excited to tell you that we will be sharing the results of that survey publicly in the spring of 2021. The Farm to School Census collects information on the scope of farm to school activity, the amount of money spent by schools on local food products, the types of products bought by schools for their nutrition programs, and other relevant information. This information can be useful for your programs for any number of reasons. You can compare your farm to school activity to other school food authorities in your state and nationwide. You'll also be able to print fact sheets on your activity for presentations and meetings with stakeholders and producers very simply and cleanly from the website that we will publish soon. You will have additional information on what is currently going on in your area and will be able to use that information to get ideas and plan for other activities that you might want to engage in. I would also like to share information about another initiative we've been working on and upcoming training for agricultural producers. In 2019, USDA established a 3-year cooperative agreement with the National Center for Appropriate Technology and the National Farm to School Network to develop a farm to school curriculum and training program for producers. As we know, the schools can offer a strong market opportunity for local producers. With more than 30 million students participating in the National School Lunch Program, this is an excellent market for farmers to tap into. The goal of the program is to provide agricultural producers the training and tools they need to build their capacity to launch or grow their efforts to market to schools. Regional Train the Trainer workshops for state agency staff will begin in summer of 2021. And states that attend those workshops will learn content and receive instruction to become facilitators so that they can then turn around and host their own trainings for producers in their states in order to enhance the farm to school market. Nonprofits and school food authorities can get involved by promoting the training among their networks of producers, and producers themselves are eligible and encouraged to attend the state and local level trainings. Stay tuned for more information on location and dates. Finally, as I mentioned, we are so excited that our 2021 Farm to School Request for Applications is now open. You can join OCFS for 2 webinars in November to review important details of the 2021 Farm to School Grant Program and review key characteristics of competitive farm to school grant applications. The first will be Tuesday, November 10th, and this webinar will provide an overview of the RFA, the request for applications, including updates to eligibility, what the new turnkey programs are, and more. So you can get familiar with the requirements of the request for applications and how to submit your grant on grants.gov. The Friday, November 13th webinar will explore the key characteristics of a competitive farm to school grant application. We will review the required components and provide technical assistance on how to submit a complete application. You'll learn tips and tricks for writing a succinct and clear application that describes your farm to school project. To register, you can visit our grant program applications resource page. We would now like to answer any questions you may have. So please feel free to type your question in the Q&A box. And I'm going to ask my colleague Stephanie to let me know if we have some questions.
Sure. Thanks, Julie. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Roberts. I'm a program analyst with the Office of Community Food Systems. So far, we have one question that came in. So please take a moment if you have any questions. Keep them coming in the Q&A. So question for you, Julie. Can nonprofit, food access, social organizations apply for the Farm to School grant?
And I would say, I would say generally, yes. That answer to the question is yes, nonprofit organizations are eligible to apply for grants. And all of the information about eligibility can be found in the request for applications, and also encourage you to join in on the webinar. The key to the nonprofit participation is that you must be working with a school or an institution participating in child nutrition programs as your primary audience or target for the project. But generally, yes, nonprofit organizations are eligible grantees.
Thanks, Julie. And Heather asked if we could please share the link to register for the webinar. Tom Hunter, we will be sharing the PDF of these slides, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So the link for the webinars will be on the slides that will be shared. Next question for you, Julie. What are the match requirements?
That's a great question. So our farm to school grants are required by law to have a 25% match, non-federal match. So folks are required to have either cash or in-kind resources that equal 25% of the total project cost.
Another question, Julie. If we need to upgrade our walk-in cooler and freezer in our school kitchen, would that be possible if we work with our FFA program?
That is a question that I think would be better reserved for our grant experts during our webinar. I do think that equipment purchases are a possible expense in the program, but it really does depend on the relation to the farm to school component. So that is something you'll need to confirm in another venue.
Thanks, Julie. Another question, do you know of any farm to school projects that have worked specifically on getting distributors to buy more local foods?
Yeah, I think that there are probably many examples of local projects that have especially worked on developing their farm to school team in a way that incorporates different components of the food system into that team. And including distributors and how do they connect to producers and intermediary to the school, and ways of improving that process and ensuring that works well. I don't have any specific in mind that I can share in this webinar, but I'm sure if you go to our resource page, you will find one resource that might be useful is looking at the little summaries that we provide for each of the grant awards every year. There's a long summary document where you can see some of the awards that have been given, and maybe search for distributor to see if there's some descriptions. But also, through our fact sheets and on our basic farm to school resources page, there is a section in there that will help you see what some of those best practices are.
Great. Another question, Tracy asked, will a recording of this be shared? Which yes, ICN will share the recording, but also will there be a write-up available of the programs and their strategies that were shared during the webinar?
So we will not be producing a separate write-up. You can always come back and refer to the slides or the recording to see some of the descriptions. Our e-newsletter, The Dirt, has featured some of these grantees and describing some of their activities. And so you might want to check again on our resource website, our e-archives for The Dirt, and go back and read. Was it the September issue or Stephanie, or the October issue that had some of them? And it may have been a few issues, but just check through the archives and you can see some of those best practices.
Yeah, you'll see in the archive there's a special COVID related issue, so you can go and find that one. And again, the link to The Dirt will be in these slides, and please sign up. Next question from Paula is about the match. Is that 25% match needed at the time the grant is given or applied for?
Yeah, Paula, I think the best way to answer that is that it's a 25% match of the total grant project budget. And so you don't necessarily have to have it in hand when you apply for it, but when you fill out your budget, you need to demonstrate what those sources are and how it fits into the big picture. So it's not like a cash up front kind of thing, if that helps answer your question.
Thanks, Julie. Roshonda had a question. Small local farmers want to participate in providing schools with locally grown produce, but there appears to be a disconnect in informing people that the opportunity is available. Are all schools required to inform local farmers about the opportunity to participate?
You're asking a very nuanced question that I'm not quite the expert to answer, but I think generally the answer is no. There isn't a requirement that schools reach out to local farmers every time they put out a bid for a solicitation for food procurement. So I think the general answer is no, but I think there are a lot of projects that a lot of farm to school grantees who have done some work and developed best practices for communicating with farmers and producers about the opportunity to sell their products to the schools, as well as a lot of best practices for schools who want to get started in local procurement and how they might be able to, begin those relationships with local producers to, talk about what their requirements are and what they need and for the meal service, or how they can start to incorporate local foods incrementally into their program and build that capacity both at the school level and the producer level. So I think there are many, many ways folks have done that, but to answer your question directly, there is no requirement that schools inform local farmers that they're procuring food.
Thanks, Julie. We have another great question. How do you recommend bridging the gap between limited cafeteria budgets and the high cost of local production?
I think that a lot of the folks engaged in Farm to School have lots of ideas for that, and you might want to check out some of our fact sheets for making sure that local procurement fits into your school budget.
Great. The next question was a comment. I'm going to just put it live it was Michelle answering Wanda that Indiana has a similar program. So check out Indiana Grown. So I'll just make that live so you can see that, Wanda. Next question was Sandra. Can state funded preschools and Head Start programs apply for these grants?
So great question. This year in 2021, we have just made institutions that are participating in Child and Adult Care Food Program or the Summer Food Service Program eligible applicants for the Farm to School grants. So yes, if the preschool in the Head Start program is participating in the Child and Adult Care Food Program, they would be eligible to apply for a grant.
Awesome. Brenda asked, are there specific objectives for the Farm to School grant?
The primary objectives for the Farm to School grant are increasing procurement of local foods and agricultural education for participating students.
Katie asks, do you have recommendations? I'll make that live. Do you have recommendations on how to support developing producers in meeting cafeteria production requirements? We've been finding some things to be cost prohibitive.
Yeah, I think there, like I said earlier, lots of best practices out there, and I encourage you to check out the resources on our website. But also, this is part of the work that we've been doing on our producer training development to help producers understand the school market really well and get a better sense of how they can adapt and enter that market in a really positive and hopefully cost-effective way for the schools, but also for their bottom line as well, to make sure that they can earn the money they need to continue producing.
All right, Willeen asked, where do you go to find other organizations or schools that have received the grants?
Sure, on our OCFS website, there is a tab on for the grant program. And if you click on that, you can navigate to a listing of all of the years of the grants awards from 2013 to 2020. And each year there is a document in there that lists all of the awards and a brief summary of the projects that they proposed and were awarded for. And and each of those year-by-year summaries are PDF documents, which means you can search in that document. Like if you're looking, like I said earlier, for projects that feature distributors or other specific activities, you can search and find the descriptions that mention those.
Great. I'm just going to check one more time. Can after-school garden clubs apply for grants? If so, what are the requirements?
So after-school garden clubs are a common and allowed activity under the Farm to School grants. And so they would be subject to the requirements of the program generally. And you can find all of that information in the request for applications.
And someone just said, Michelle said, this was so helpful. Thanks for all the information. Can wait another few seconds to see if anything else comes in.
I think we're very close to right on time.
Yes. Tom Hunter, I think we can turn it back to you and Patrick.
A few announcements before we end today's webinar. Virtual ICN will be hosting virtual instructor-led trainings provided by ICN beginning October. We'll also have them in November, December of 2020. Registration is available at theicn.org/VILT. Before we conclude today's webinar, we would like to bring your attention to an upcoming training. ICN is hosting Introduction to School Nutrition Leadership as an interactive virtual session on January the 11th through 15th, 2021 for new and aspiring directors. This 4.5-day session provides an overview of the management components of school nutrition programs. Participants who complete this course will receive 36 units of continuing education that are accredited by the Commission on Dietetic Registration and the School Nutrition Association. 3 hours of college credit are available for this session through the University of Mississippi School of Applied Sciences. Interested students must apply to UM prior to the training session and pay all applicable fees and tuition. Visit the ICN website for registration information. If you have questions, contact Lisa Rogers at ltrogers@olemiss.edu. Just a final reminder that today's webinar has been recorded and can be viewed on the ICN website at theicn.org/star. Please complete the evaluation for this webinar. Thanks again to our speaker, Julie Brewer. This concludes today's webinar. Have a great day.